So I wanted to do this video, and I'm just going to leave this with audio and all that sort of stuff so that you guys can just kind of, so that I can more go through this. But I had a conversation with an individual yesterday on BlueSky, of all places, a very pretentious individual. And I'm just going to call them an individual because this person supposedly goes by she, her, but they also and claims to be a trans person. And I'm not going to deny the validity of any of that. That's not what I'm here to discuss. The issue is that this person is a very much the epitome of the Western chauvinist liberal. Especially if this person is in the trans community, this is kind of what I'm talking about. This is kind of the problem that still exists within our community and if one is to call themselves a leftist like this person was, then one needs to first get over their privilege, get over their whiteness, and get over their first worldism. Because what this person was saying was that they were basically trying to say that China is somehow worse off for LGBT people than America is. And if anyone ever takes a good hard look at how America is doing right now, they would know that's a load of horse shit. And this person, you'll see, was trying to argue with me using non sequiturs and just kind of using bad faith arguments in general to essentially suggest that China somehow is like killing their people, they're oppressing their people, they're forcing they're forcing trans people and LGBT people to wait until they're 18 to get gender affirming surgery, which we kind of need to get over here too in most states. Yeah, there are some states where that's not the situation, but most states still require that. And let's be real, no one is forcing or trying to get teenagers to have gender affirming surgery. I get the whole argument about gender affirming care, but let's be real, no child is getting gender affirming surgery. That is something that is genuinely something that they genuinely tell people to wait until they get to a certain age to be. And while I may not agree or disagree with that, the issue still remains that is kind of the overall general thing that exists throughout any society, not just in America, not just in, China or England or wherever, but most places. So, like, I don't really understand what their argument for that really was. But they were trying to they were also trying to use the China project as their one of the things that as their piece of evidence to go off of. The China project, by the way, is a organization that had to stop in 2023 because of quote unquote funding issues. It is also an organization that was founded by a South African individual who was living in America, in New York City, and had his website banned in China because of the lies that he would spread. The same individual also received a lot of criticism in the US because, again, of a lot of lies that he spread. So not really a reputable source of information. But yeah, this person also claims that they're not American, but it doesn't really matter. This comes from a very Americanist, very white, very first worldist sense of privilege. Okay. And so they try to go on this whole thing about how, if China's so progressive, why do you need parental consent for, sex change and to wait 5 years for SRI? Again, most places in America have that. And this is the one part that does make me believe that either they are not American or are American and are just ignorant. Either case, this person was trying to say that, was trying to completely does not seem to understand that, again, that is what kind of is the situation that exists in most places, that you need parental consent over here too. It's not just exclusive to China. And I go on to say that China has a thriving trans community, and that, if you were to use something like Red Note, like I do, and actually engage with Chinese people, you'd see that. Instead, you choose to be an ignorant Western chauvinist. This ended up being the crux for our argument for quite some time, with us going back and forth, with them then accusing me of being, essentially being a raging racist. That was the thing. They go straight to the, oh, you're a racist because you engage with actual Chinese people. How do you logic yourself into that? Yes, whataboutism, the preeminent symptom of tanky cognitive dissonance. Again, the use of the word tanky by, again, a so-called person who is, claiming to be, first of all, claims to be a transsexual, which, depending on your opinion on the term transsexual, most of us kind of use the term transgender, but okay, to each their own. That's not really a concern in this case. The part that gets me is the part that where they said anarchist, and they, where they claim to be, be essentially a leftist, and they claim to be, trans or whatever the case may be. Well, if you really are an anarchist, you're very obviously kind of bad at it, and this would be something that you would already kind of know, just kind of as a just out of principle. You would kind of understand that China is not this, evil place where they're just oppressing the LGBT community. In fact, quite the opposite. They actually are rather more accepting than most Western countries. And again, one would know that if they actually just sat down and had a conversation with some of them. But yeah, this is the typical response I would get from someone who I would call an ultra, one of the, a shit lib, whatever, but definitely not an anarchist or a leftist by any means. But I'm sure that you, a white American, would know better than actual Chinese people. I never said I knew any better than actual Chinese people. I'm saying that I engage with Chinese people in actual conversations. You'd know better than actual Chinese people researching the issue, and you're totally not a raging racist. After all, you're a quote-unquote communist, and communists could never be bigoted. Well, I am a communist. And no, we aren't ever bigoted. You're the one that's being bigoted. You're the one that's being ignorant here. So, yeah, I think that's rather... that was just rather an interesting argument right there. straight to the calling me a racist. The whole rage baiting is really what this is. Trying to say that, I'm not doing my research when clearly I am. I'm actually, like, I don't know how much more research you can get when you go directly to actual Chinese people on RedNote, a Chinese app, and are engaging with Chinese trans people. So yeah, somehow I'm a raging racist and I'm a bigot. Okay. So I call her on this. I say I do listen to real Chinese people on RedNote, trans people who are goth, by the way, because I also engage with the goth community over there. There is a pretty sizable goth community in Guangzhou. They exist in other parts of China as well, but Guangzhou has a pretty large group of them. There is a lot of trans people in Guangzhou. There's a lot of trans people in China in general. And they have a very large community in many parts of the country. They don't feel persecuted. If you actually, again, and I say, if you actually engaged with people over there, you'd understand that. Clearly, you are engaging with Chinese diaspora, not Chinese people. And I'm not trying to say Chinese diaspora aren't Chinese people, by the way. I'm just saying that Chinese diaspora typically tend to be the individuals who are, for lack of a better term, assimilated. They are very much whitewashed. They typically tend to regurgitate a lot of American / fascist talking points / white supremacist talking points. So yeah, and this was in response to this person saying that some U.S. states with have parental consent, but does not mean that China is being more progressive. Yeah, it kind of does. The fact that China does not actually have a federal statute that prohibits or tries to restrict care. China does not have, they're not trying to restrict trans care over in their country. But you know who is trying to restrict trans care on a national level? The United States. Yeah, at least in America, you can move to another state. In China, you'd have to emigrate. No, you are free to move about the country as anybody else would. There's nothing prohibiting you from staying in one part of the country or another. You don't have to get permission to travel to one. Like, what the fuck are you even on? Where are you getting this information from? Yes, I'm a Western chauvinist because I choose to listen to real Chinese people instead of calling them CIA plants. Okay, again, no, you're not engaging with real Chinese people. You're engaging with Chinese diaspora. I'm the one that engages with actual people in China. You are engaging with people that are likely already in the United States or in other parts of the world, people who, immigrated to other parts of the world, who literally left China. The straight shooting Baba, aka the Confucian socialist, has this same problem with Chinese ultras in Malaysia. People that are trying to get him to learn Chinese, as if it's some sort of a qualifier for him being, of some Chinese background. That's not the case. In this case, this is the same thing, except this is just Chinese people that are shitting on China and making up lies about it. Kind of like how North Korean defectors what's her name? Yaolin Park or whatever her name is, how they make up a lot of lies about North Korea and go on a big old right-wing grift and, regurgitate a lot of fascist talking points. Funny how that seems to be for people that defect from the country that they're originally from, because they probably did something or said something that would likely have them unalived in those countries, and probably for good reason. So yeah. And also, I never called them a CIA plant. I just called them a Western chauvinist. Somebody actually did call them on this too, saying that nobody was saying that was calling you a CIA plant. You're just mad because you're being called out for being ignorant. Somebody literally jumped to my defense and called this Olivia Cash ignorant. Because, and like, yeah, I was not calling them a CIA plant. Where in any of this conversation did I say that they were a CIA plant? I didn't. I said that they were a Western chauvinist and that they believe in Western prop, but I never called them a CIA plant. And then they're trying to claim that, that that's racist, that somehow, saying that Chinese diaspora are, who are making up lies about China and who are regurgitating, Western propaganda, being Western mouthpieces, that somehow that's not a form of chauvinism, that's not that. And I'm not calling them CIA plants, but let's be honest, there are some that could technically be, that do go to work for the United States government, or at least propaganda mouthpieces of the United States government. That doesn't make them CIA plants. That just basically makes them, well, frankly, traitors. And it just makes them, that does make them chauvinists. That's not being racist. That's just being factual. Did they personally? And then she, in response to me saying that I do listen to real Chinese people, this was the first and really only time she actually ever really acknowledged, that she really ever acknowledged that I actually talk to real people. And so she's like, did they personally tell you that they're not persecuted, or did you just assume that because of your white savior complex? I'm not trying to be a white savior. That's not what a white savior is. What? Pretty sure if you told one of the many trans women in Chinese men's prisons they're not persecuted, they'd spit in your face. AES is when the state lets people rape you for fun. I actually do ask questions to people over there. And no, they actually say that they see what's going on in the U.S. and they're more afraid for us. Also, especially considering that, here in America, you can be put in, even if you are a trans woman, you can still be put in men's prisons, whether that's because you haven't legally changed your gender and your name or anything like that, or because some states, and frankly, currently the current administration, are trying to push to make it so that none of that matters anyway. That if you were assigned male at birth, you get put into a male prison even though you are a woman. And vice versa for trans men who were assigned female at birth being put into female prisons. So, I don't know what your argument here is. America already kind of does that, and frankly, they do it. They are becoming even more hostile in favor of it. They're becoming more hostile by being in favor of it. Sorry. So yeah, I actually ask questions, and they say that they see what's going on in the U.S. and they are afraid for us. They actually say, as long as you don't draw too much attention to yourself, i.e., you kind of don't really talk politics over there, most people just kind of stare, but that's about it. Like, yeah, there might be some social disagreement about it, especially amongst the older generation, but most people over there kind of don't care or accept it. It's actually, in fact, in the coming decades, we will probably see it actually becoming more accepted and, uh, and more recognized, and, might actually gain, an official legal standing, though they don't necessarily like, and while that legal standing would be good, they don't necessarily need it because it's not really that much of an issue over there. This person is just going off of sheer lies about the Chinese state. So I decided to continue on this, and I said that at least in China, you're far less likely to be killed and raped than you are in a Western society. At least in China, they don't tolerate PDF files, they execute them. In America, we protect them. But over in China, they actually do something about their CSA exploiters and CSA abusers. They actually go after those people and they take them out back and they unalive them, as they should. So yeah, at least in China, you're far less likely to face that type of issue as a trans woman. Not saying it still doesn't happen, but I'm saying you're less likely to. They don't tolerate incompetent, business people. They unalive them. I look at objective reality between the two countries. I'd rather live there than here, as a disabled person or a poor person. So yeah, and especially since the poor in China also have a better quality of life than the middle class in America. You really have to be brainwashed or blind not to see that. My point is, there's not a literal trans genocide going on in China. There is one that is going on in the US, and there's literal people that are starting to pick up on it. Like, literal studies are being told that experts warn the US is in the early stages of a trans genocide. So yeah, and then after all this person never really responded back to me. Instead, they just blocked me like a coward. So yeah, that they just ended up blocking me like a coward, because I had made my point very clear that I had actively engaged with Chinese people on a Chinese app designed for the Chinese people. It was their version of TikTok, aka RedNote. I actually do engage with people. I have cultural exchanges with people. I actually talk to real people. And because of that, people like Olivia Cash there hate me for it. Liberals hate me for it. And I'm going to outright state it. That person is a liberal. They come off as a very white, very first worldist, very privileged individual. And I'm not going to call into question whether or not they are trans or anything like that. That's not my place to do so, not even as a trans woman. But what I can say is that they are your standard, typical gender warrior, someone who is screaming, lies based off of Western prop, trying to get their point across. And when they are confronted by someone that is saying something to the contrary, is actually correcting them, someone who has actually had a conversation with actual trans people in China, actual Chinese trans people, who have said, no, we're pretty safe over here. People are more it is a more accepting environment than it seems like you have over in the United States. The fact that and just in general, the fact that I myself am not a gender warrior, that's why people hate me. This is why they come after me, why they are quick to call me racist, why they're quick to try to call me bigoted or ignorant, despite the fact that, I actually do my research. I actually talk to real people over in China or in other parts of the world. And while they live in their little bubble of ignorance, their little bubble of privilege, their little bubble of whiteness, their little bubble of confirmation bias and political bias and everything else, while they live in that little bubble of ignorance, I actually choose to live in the real world. I actually choose to challenge these perceptions, these thought processes, this bias. I try to actually educate people. And when I do that, I get pushback. I get people that block me. I get, people that try to sometimes go as far as trying to do character assassination on me. Or in the case of how it was recently, how they literally nuked my fucking YouTube channel and why I had to restart this one. Trying to go after my social media. They hate me because I'm not a gender warrior. They hate me because I come correct. That is the reason why you see all this shit that's happened to me recently, especially in the past year. Because I'm challenging liberals. I'm challenging fascists. I'm challenging Zionists. I'm challenging whiteness. I'm challenging gender warriors. And because of that, they hate me for it. They will come after you if you try to do that. But is that stopping me? No, I'm still here. And I'm going to continue to do what I do and say what I say. I'm not going anywhere. As I said in my video, the Red Pagan will not be deterred. I will keep coming back and coming back and coming back. No one's going to stop me. You will literally have to unalive me to silence me. There's no other option. Otherwise, I will be out there saying what I'm saying right now. I will continue to be pushing my perspectives, pursuing educating others, and pursuing educating myself, because I'm always looking to better myself as well. But my ultimate goal is to educate others, to break them of their privilege, their first worldism, their whiteness, to purge them of these lies, this Western chauvinism, and this propaganda. It has to start somewhere. Somebody has to do it. Someone has to challenge these notions. And as a queer trans woman who is not a gender warrior, who is doing this, that's seen as a threat to people like them. It scares them. Good. You should be. Let that fear drive you to challenge your biases and your preconceived notions and your current perceptions of things. Challenge them. Because there's no shame in changing your opinion or your entire perspective on life, your ideology, when presented with new information. I'm Red Pagan Nicole for the Red Pagan Network, signing off. Until next time.